Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Arun. I'm a solutions engineer here at SciNote, and I'm excited to have all of you join us today on talking about how to run a digital-first life science incubator. And this is going to be a collaborative webinar between SciNote and Pivot Park. And before we jump into introductions for my fellow presenters here, I will just take a moment to go over today's agenda for this webinar. So we'll be talking a little bit about how Pivot Park as an incubator is using SciNote. So my co-presenters here will be going into some of the challenges and solutions they're using. And from there, we'll talk about how you can continue using SciNote if you were to scale your startup outside of an incubator. Before we jump into it, a quick overview of SciNote here. So for those of you that aren't familiar, SciNote is an electronic lab notebook that is used by a lot of life science companies to help you manage and organize your research data. It does come with an all-in-one solution to manage your inventories, protocols, experiments, etc., with full traceability, making you audit ready. SciNote is also trusted by dozens of organizations in the private and government sector, including the FDA and USDA. And just to give you an idea on the current deployment of SciNote at an incubator such as Pivot Park, this is basically how we have it structured at the moment. So for startups, you may be using a single ELN environment, but you do get your independent workspaces in there. So your data is siloed from any other startup that's sharing the same ELN environment. So everything is secure, organized. We have robust role-based access controls built in with complete traceability on who is in the system, what they're doing, etc. There are also a set of shared tools to enable digital collaboration between your colleagues in the same team. And for the incubator's perspective, what you get is a single ELN environment to manage, which makes it easier from an admin standpoint. And you can have multiple companies in your single ELN environment, since SciNote does have the ability to create multiple workspaces. And also, in case there is a situation where inventories or common reagents, consumables, etc., are shared by multiple organizations, you can host a single inventory in your SciNote environment and make it shared across multiple workspaces for each startup that has their own workspace. And I will now hand it over to Donna to give to do an introduction and give a quick overview on Pivot Park. Over to you, Donna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna, and thank you for having me. Before I explain how we use SciNote within our shared lab model, I would like to give you a short introduction to the Pivot Park and what drives us. Pivot Park is located in Os in the Netherlands and is one of Europe's leading biopharmaceutical campuses. Our mission is simple but powerful: to accelerate biotech innovation in order to improve global health. We aim to improve life science companies and early-stage startups. The campus was founded in 2012 on the historic Organon MSD site. It's a place with a century of pharmaceutical innovation behind it. Building on that strong legacy, Pivot Park has evolved into one of Europe's leading science campuses and a dynamic hub for biopharmaceutical R&D. Today, Pivot Park is home to more than 60 life science companies and over 1,000 skilled professionals, working across the full spectrum of drug development, from early discovery and preclinical research to advanced production technologies and analytical services. And what makes the campus unique is its fully integrated environment. The state-of-the-art laboratories, GMP compliant pilot facilities, and specialized CROs and CDMOs, they all operate side by side, enabling collaboration and acceleration throughout the value chain. What sets us apart is that we don't just rent out lab and office space. We build an innovation ecosystem. We invest in a world-class R&D infrastructure and a vibrant community, so that together we can improve global health. But infrastructure is only part of the story. Equally important is our community and support structure. We provide access to knowledge expertise, funding opportunities, and business coaching, and a strong network of academic and industrial partners. By combining these physical and operational elements, we create the conditions for startups to focus on what they do best, developing new medicines and technologies, without being held back by high initial costs or administrative complexity. This mission of accelerating biotech innovation underpins everything we do at Pivot Park. And it's also why we adopted the digital lab management systems, SciNote. So now that you know who we are and what drives us, I like to take you inside our shared lab and explain how it works in practice. So at Pivot Park, we run a shared lab model specifically designed to lower the entry barrier for early stage biotech startups. The concept is simple. Instead of every company investing heavily in their own lab infrastructure from day one, they can access a fully equipped laboratory as a service. Physically, the shared lab is set up as an open access facility with individual lab benches. That means that each company gets an assigned bench space and their own basic equipment, like calibrated pipettes, vortex, stirring plates, and that allows startups to scale up their presence according to their needs without committing to full lab facilities. We also have shared core equipment, means balances, centrifuges, Western blot, PCR equipment, biosafety cabinets, microscopes, and freezers. They are available to all users, and that removes the needs for costly upfront investment in specialized equipment. We have a dedicated cell culture room, a molecular biology lab, and a microscopy room with controlled access. This provides startups with a professional, safe environment for cell-based experiments while ensuring regulatory compliance. We also have 150 plus chemicals and a secure storage for samples and reagents, including personal fridges and freezers and a central cryobank for cell lines, ensuring safe handling, traceability, and reliability for sensitive biological materials. We also have a central booking system and safety training. All equipment is scheduled via one digital platform to prevent conflicts, and every user completes mandatory training. We also have centralized supplies, waste, and maintenance. The reagents and the consumables and the hazardous waste are managed centrally, and the dedicated technical staff oversees the equipment calibration, the servicing, and the compliance with the Dutch and EU standards. This relieves the startups of operational burdens and lets them focus on research. We also have additional equipment that I wanted to mention, like the minus 80 degrees freezer, the availability of nitrogen, cell line storage, and dry ice, autoclaving, and even a glass washing service, where you can bring your used glass, book a washing slot, and receive them back cleaned 2 days later. This layout allows multiple startups to work side by side, sharing expensive infrastructure and specialized instruments. A young company can walk into a ready-to-use lab and start generating data almost immediately, without the long build-out lead times or the large capital investments. Operationally, we manage the shared lab through clear procedures and digital tools to ensure everything stays organized, safe, and compliant. Launching a biotech company is expensive, with traditional labs requiring major upfront investments in space, equipment, and infrastructure. At Pivot Park, startups avoid these capital costs by only paying for the bench space and the equipment they need. This turns the fixed cost into variable ones and allows the precious funding to be directed towards talents and experiments rather than the infrastructure. The lab safety and compliance are handled centrally, and every user completes safety training, and all equipment is maintained according to the Dutch and EU standards. This ensures startups can operate compliantly from day one without hiring their own staffs for that. The shared lab equipment fosters daily interaction between the startups, encouraging spontaneous knowledge sharing, troubleshooting, and partnerships. supported by the community events and networking app that we also have. This collaborative atmosphere accelerates innovation and connects companies with over 60 potential partners on the campus. All equipment and the usage is scheduled and tracked digitally, ensuring fair access and preventing conflicts over the instruments or the lab space. This transparency helps to keep operations efficient and avoids delays in research activities. And before accessing the lab, every user must complete safety and compliance training. This guarantees consistently high safety standards across all companies and ensures that all scientists are aligned with the shared protocols and procedures. The reagents and the consumables and the hazardous waste are all managed centrally, and that relieves startups from the burden of inventory management and waste handling. We also have our lab manager who oversees the equipment maintenance, the calibration, and the regulatory compliance. Well, this centralized approach keeps the lab running smoothly and meets all safety and quality standards, while freeing the startups from having to set up those systems themselves. We also have challenges, of course, in this shared lab model. And I will go into the challenges shortly, and Tom will then go into more depth with you. The data integrity and traceability. Well, with so many users and projects in one lab, it can become difficult to track who did what and when and with which resources. So without proper documentation, you risk mix-ups and duplicate experiments or even safety incidents. In an early stage biotech, maintaining high quality data and documentation is crucial. And the paper notebooks, they can be lost, they can be incomplete or hard to decipher, especially when multiple people share equipment or reagents. If each startup kept separate records in their own format, it would be chaos. And in a busy shared lab, coordinating the use of equipment, reagents, and space is an ongoing challenge. We need to prevent the bottlenecks and avoid the downtime. So this is where SciNote really helps us out. In short, a digital-first approach helps to allow us to run a shared lab that remains organized and compliant and scalable. And by leveraging these digital systems, we turned the challenges such as the traceability, the data management, and the research scheduling into managed processes. Tom will now go into the challenges in more depth with you. So I will now hand over the mic to Tom, and thank you for your attention.
So thank you, Donna, for this nice introduction about the incubator. And today I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share how we actually used SciNote as an ELN, but also as an inventory management system for the shared facilities of the Pivot Park Incubator. And maybe as a small side note, it's nice to see how we now use SciNote for like a shared lab, but actually I'm doing this role as laboratory manager besides my own company, for which I'm now using SciNote several years. So that's also how I know Arun for many years, but now also have seen both functionalities, both for one company, but also for how we use it in the incubator. And I'm happy to take you through. And as Donna said, I will do this following these three challenges that we faced, where we were stuck and where we actually looked for a system that could aid us to work on data integrity for the traceability of data, but also the secure storage of data for startups. I think this is where we really use the ELN function of SciNote. But it was also the second and the third challenge are very interconnected by that if we are going to have chemical stocks or stocks of genetically modified organisms, we also have to comply with EU and national law about the storage of hazardous chemicals or dangerous genetically modified organisms. And therefore, we need to control both ends. So we need to know what the companies do, but we also need to be able to report it to the government. And that's what really drove us to set up this structure in SciNote. And as a final part, I will move to challenge 3, where I will address how we fix these legal issues, but also how we made it possible for the companies in the incubator to be compliant, and also to be compliant with regulations of, for example, the FDA and the EMA. But before going into that, I will address the first challenge, so data integrity. And therefore, we spotted 2 main items that were important for us as a provider of these shared facilities. And that was that there is IP-sensitive data, especially if you are working on new drugs, developing a new technology. You really want to be sure that this IP part is safely stored. And that's just in an ELN, it's just so much easier than in a shared lab and in a shared office where you have this paper lab book. As Donna said, it can hang around, it can maybe get lost, maybe others look into it. It's just not as secure. But also from a more like general perspective, you want to be sure that the environment in which you store it is really safe. And I think that's where SciNote really outperformed other systems. They have the good IT security checks. They do have these penetration checks on a periodic basis. And that's what even me as a startup, but also for the incubator, really drove us across the line on the securing IP data. But also the ELN function and storing this data correctly also allows you to log when you actually thought about it, when ideas were raised, when you got your first result. And this, although it seems not maybe as important, the data logging in this early phase, might become especially relevant if there are some like IP litigations later on. And then if you can just show like, yes, this was the moment in time that we invented this, because this is our log of our ELN, then it will just give you so much security, or actually confidence in such IP litigation phases. So I think, therefore, we said this is also important to incorporate it into the incubator, just to be there and organize it well from the start on. And I think the same holds if you work on data packages and to become like investor ready, because that is also one of the ideas behind the incubator, to become investor ready. And then you need to have like a structured data package. And if you can just show like, this is how we documented our experiments, but also our samples, that looks really well to investors, and also gives them confidence to maybe make some investments. And I think here I also praise the flexibility in SciNote, because it also allows to actually enter data in different fields. So it's not just for a biology lab, but also, for example, if you work more like compound synthesis, there are integrations. For example, the one with Marvin to do some like chemical drawings or draw your reaction schemes. And I think that makes it really suited for the broad audience that we target in our incubator space. And then for the second challenge, which was more about like the inventories and how can we organize this to comply with the legal requirements, but also to allow the companies to have their samples organized all nicely. And I think this was actually one of the really first things we talked about with Arun and his colleagues, like how are we going to structure a SciNote in such a way that we have like general stocks or general inventories where we don't want every company to actually add data because we want to keep it like curated. So that's where we thought about inventories like the general lab procedures, the chemical stocks, but also stocks of cells and shared equipment. And that's something that is has administered rights with the laboratory manager. And one of the advantages here is as well that we can see what is entered or what is new in the incubator. So for example, for chemicals, I can always see like, can we use this chemical in our general labs? Are there like additional safety measures that we need to take? And if so, I can discuss this with the company who wants to use it. So it's also a kind of safety check to ensure that everybody can work safely in the general shared labs. But besides these general inventories, we also have company private inventories, and that's for the IP sensitive data. So for example, where you can on a file name or based on the name of a certain chemical see what the company is working on, and you want to protect this, and that is what can be stored in their private space. And these like private inventories, but also the private ELN notebook, nodes, experiments, protocols, etc., can be exported once the company moves out of the incubator. But Arun will tell more about that later on during this webinar. And just an example to show how this works is, I think, our chemical database. So that's what you can see here. So here we have just some chemicals, and then we can enter information about like stock, but also about safety, about like SDS files, so safety data sheets or certificates of analysis. But we also wanted to have the option to allow companies to store their chemicals in the right cabinet. So for example, if you have flammable or dangerous goods, you want to store it in a safe cabinet, like a DUPA cabinet. But if you don't want that everybody uses it, for example, if it's a very expensive chemical, or you just want to constrained access because you want to keep it very pure, then in this owner field, you can just say like, this is my particular company stock. And so we keep like flexibility to all store it correctly, to track it from the incubator side, but also for companies to just own their own compound stocks. And this is also something that we have done for other databases. One of them includes, for example, the pipettes, where we can also assign pipettes who are like fully calibrated, offered by us, but we can assign them to a certain company. But then still, we can see when a next calibration is due, and the company can see like what is the current calibration status of these pipettes. And the same holds for the equipment that we have at the lab. For each piece of equipment, we have an entry into the equipment inventory, and this actually has the information about the equipment, but it also has the manuals of the equipment, but also some instructions for use that we made. And then using the Zebra print integration with SciNote, we were able to print labels, put them on the equipment, so then people can just use a scanner with SciNote and then easily access our notes or the manuals to see how to use this equipment safely. And it was also for us a way to have a structured way where to put the most like the relevant documents, rather than just putting them in one shared folder on a OneDrive or other shared disk. And we were also thinking of like, can we do more than just providing an inventory? Because ideally, you also want to have like reminders for yourself when new pipette calibrations are due. And that's why next to the inventories, we also made experiments for each piece of equipment. So as you can see here, for example, we have like pipette calibration entry or like project. And then there is for each pipette, we have a calibration experiment with each task being a separate calibration event. And then with the due date function in the task, you can actually set it for like in half a year or maybe 1 year. And then you get a reminder in the SciNote homepage or like overview page, like this pipette is due for calibration. And besides that it allows us to track calibrations and to enter the documents in a structured way, it also allows the users to really see like, this is how my pipettes behaved. And the same holds for the maintenance of some of the equipment that we have, like for example, flow cabinets, centrifuges. If there is like annual maintenance, we get like prompts or alarms that maintenance is due. And that really helps us to schedule and keep the maintenance all running or proceeding correctly within the incubator space. And then I would like to move to the final part, which is the challenge 3, which was on compliance. And as I said, there are like two things that compliance means to us. First, it's compliance for the company. Second, it's compliance for us with local and EU regulations. And I will first address how we facilitate the companies to be compliant. For example, as a campus focusing on biopharmaceutical companies, many of them are working on like developing new drugs or new diagnostic methods, processes. And there you really want to think about the EMA and FDA regulations early on and to take them even with you in the whole process of deciding on studies or preclinical studies to be performed. So you start to build your R&D dossier already quite early on. And I think there, SciNote facilitates to structure it all according to these regulations very well as they comply with the 21 CFR Part 11 solution for the FDA. But also, if you have, for example, if you're working on a diagnostic test, or if you want to validate your target clinically and you want to use some samples from patients, then you might want to, if there's like patient information, you have to comply with the GDPR regulations in the EU. But also there, SciNote really all arranged it to be like GDPR compliant. And as an early startup, you don't want to have, you don't want to spend efforts and multiple days on writing procedures, but also making sure that everything security-wise is correct to comply with these regulations. You want to focus on the science, on getting new funding in, these kind of things. So that's where really this environment helps to accelerate the startups in the incubator space. And finally, we also see that, especially for CROs that want to partner with pharma, the extent of data protection, but also security measures to be implemented is exponentially growing. And therefore, SciNote also has like the correct certifications, like the ISO 27001, but also SOC 2. But they also have these reports on regular penetration tests, etc. So that really gives your clients a good feeling, and you can just check the boxes like, yes, we are compliant with everything that you require. And then the second part of compliance for us is actually the part where we, as a provider of the lab space, have to be compliant with EU and national regulations, for example, for working with genetically modified organisms. So therefore, we have them tracked in special inventories, so like cell lines, bacterial cell lines. But you also need to have a very standard working procedures for the cell culture labs. That's all arranged in SciNote and easily accessible for all users. The same holds for these hazardous chemicals. We need to comply with it from an environmental perspective, but also from the perspective that the employees of the companies have to be able to work in a safe environment. So it's, on the one hand, it's legislation, but we also want to offer a safe environment. And that's also the case with the final point, the annual equipment checks. It's just, you don't want to expose like personnel or employees of these startups to, for example, being able to have an electric shock, or maybe there is like heat development or even fires. And we just want to prevent that. And that's why these annual or like 6-month maintenance intervals are so important. And a nice example where this is effectuated is our like chemical database, again, where there are now like 2 chemicals that you see which have a high hazardous character. And what we actually did was that we added these H phrases, which are like the second column. So these H phrases tell something about the hazard for employees, for humans, but it also already tells you like, is this carcinogenic or is this reprotoxic? And this is also like labeled on the specific bottles. So it also helps our employees to see, is this a hazardous chemicals? Do I need to take additional measures? And ideally, they already can see it while planning the experiment and while searching for the chemical while doing so. And this is like more the employee safety. I think an equally important part is the environmental safety, where we have to comply with a lot of law. And that is also what saves the companies a lot of time. So they don't have to think about all these legislative actions. They can just focus on the science. But also here, for example, we have the GSH and ADR classes of the chemicals just immediately visualized. For the GSH symbols, you can just click, and then like the ones that apply drop down. And then, of course, if you want to know more about the risk, there is always the SDS document associated to each chemical where you can find more details. So I think with this, I've given you a like overview in a nutshell what SciNote actually has meant for us, how it provided a tailored solution for the incubator lab and really helps our startups to be compliant with like national and international regulations, so, and that they can work in a safe environment, but also that they are ready for investors, that they are confident about their IP position. All these things where you can maybe not spend a lot of time on as an early startup, but is of pivotal importance. And I think thereby we are really glad that the whole SciNote team was so supportive in setting up this system. And with that, I would like to hand over the camera or the floor to Arun, who will actually show a bit more about how this collaboration works.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom, for all that wonderful, insightful information, and really appreciate you sharing the details with some screenshots on how exactly SciNote is helping you address some of these specific challenges. So to sort of bring everything together and wrap it up, I'd like to close out by talking a little bit on how SciNote could support you as an incubator or even as a startup as a part of an incubator. So we would treat, whether you're an incubator or a startup, we would treat your support the same way we do with any of our premium customers. You have a dedicated SciNote support team, which is spread across the globe, so you would get responses very quickly. You also get a dedicated customer success manager that will handle all of your onboarding, training, and also serve as your primary point of contact. And also, we have a lot of self-service resources available that are constantly updated. So we have a knowledge base that's free to access, which includes a lot of articles on how a lot of the features in SciNote work. And these are complemented with screenshots and videos that guide you through the exact steps on how to do something in SciNote. And lastly, we also have a product enhancement feedback loop, which we're very proud of. So just to give you a little bit of an overview on how we operate in terms of product improvements, we look to our customers, our users, to tell us what is SciNote lacking in, what can be improved, what would they like to see. And we catalog all of this information, and it's reviewed in detail by our product team as they're planning the roadmap for next year or the year after. And the very last topic I'd like to touch on is, let's say you do join an incubator like Pivot Park as a startup and things go well and you're scaling up and now would like to get an independent SciNote instance or environment. Is that possible? Well, the short answer is yes. So SciNote can support your move towards an independent SciNote environment. You can migrate a lot of your independent or personal inventories that you've created, and also any protocol templates that you've created in SciNote. For all of your project or experimental data that you've captured in the shared SciNote environment, these can be exported with total traceability and would be uploaded into your dedicated new SciNote environment as legacy data. And to sort of complement this, we do have additional professional services that we can offer, depending on your exact needs as you're spinning out into your own instance. We can give you more custom migration services. Also, if you need to integrate with any other databases or other softwares, we can support that. If you observe that some customizations are needed, that is also something we can help you with. And lastly, when it comes to due diligence, especially if you're gearing up for any investment or you're preparing for an audit, this is also something we can help you with, because we can guide you on how exactly to use the activity log in SciNote, how to use the audit trail, how to use the global search to look for something specific. So any questions around these topics, our support team will gladly assist you with. And also, let's say you do encounter a scenario where you need to share some of your data with someone that isn't a SciNote user. Well, we have ways for you to export some of that data in a nice, readable format that is organized and that can contain traceability data in case that's important for whoever is reading that report that you generate. And of course, lastly, we have continuous support throughout your transition process for any questions that come up. And on that note, I'd like to close the presentation portion of this webinar and open it up for questions. And I see we already have a few questions that have come in. So Tom is back and there's Donna as well. So I think we have enough time to go over all the questions. So I'll start with the first question. And then Tom, Donna, depending on whether this question is addressed to any of you directly, I will hand the mic over to you. So the first question, Tom, this one's actually for you. Tom shared a lot about the shared inventory. How do you utilize the ELN part in the shared lab?
Yeah, so I think it's indeed. I talked most about the inventories as that is something that we had to set up as the incubator management team, but I think that the ELN part is something where we really leave flexibility for our users. So I think they can set up their own ELN environment, so to track laboratory nodes with their own structure. Of course, there's always some kind of like advice. Also, how I use it, for example, within my own company, I can just advise them is like how you can make a structure on like with folders, projects, and then with experiments and tasks. And that often helps them with like a quick start next to like the materials that you provide online, of course, in the knowledge center. And I think that is also one of the advantages of SciNote. It's flexible, so you can just design it to your own needs, the structure. And that's also what I said with the Marvin Chem Axon. It's really helpful to have such features in as well. So I think there it's just dependent on like the company how they actually run the ELN, but it works for them.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom, for that. And just to add, from my perspective, I mentioned a little bit about this in how we support incubators and startup. So in addition to receiving the training and knowledge resources from SciNote, you would have, in Pivot Park's example, someone like Tom or at another incubator, a user that has been using SciNote that you can rely on for advice and sort of have that internal SciNote community, if you will. All right, moving on to the next question,
Indeed.
which, Tom, you kind of addressed the answer to the next question a little bit in the previous response. So the next question is, can each company or startup customize SciNote workflows independently? So again, short answer is yes, because even though you have a shared SciNote environment, as a startup, you would get your own workspace within that SciNote environment. So your workspace would remain yours. No one else would have access to it. And in your workspace, you can customize your own workflows, your own protocols, etc. And this does touch on something Tom mentioned earlier. So Tom, if you'd like to maybe chime in, speak from your direct experience, please feel free to.
Yeah, I think this was, besides the structure of the inventories, this was one of the first things we talked about, Arun, and there we came up with a solution to just, as you said, make different teams with their own workspace, and like the administrator accounts, like the laboratory manager account is just another team, but then overseeing like these general parts. But I always create an account for a new company joining the incubator, like company A. And then once they are in, I, as the laboratory manager, move out, and then I can't access any of their data anymore. So we as Pivot Park don't have access to that, and all your data is private and secure.
Excellent. All right, moving on to the third question. How long does it typically take to onboard new companies in the shared lab environment? So maybe I'll just talk about it from SciNote's perspective, and then Tom, Donna, please feel free to chime in from Pivot Park's or an incubator's perspective. So from SciNote's perspective, the onboarding timeline really depends on the customer. So if you'd like to move at a rapid pace, we could onboard you in a matter of weeks. If you need more time where you'd like to take it in phases or stages where we start with one part of SciNote, you go back and try to implement what we trained on and then move on to the next stage. You know, that could take the timeline from weeks to a matter of a month and a half to even several months. But from SciNote side, like I mentioned, we can go at the pace that the customer prefers. And in addition to having the self-serve resources, once again, you would have a dedicated customer success manager that serves as your initial point of contact for any questions you may have.
Yeah, and then from the Pivot Park perspective, starting out in the incubator, that's something that we can actually arrange within 1 week. That's because it's really set up as a turnkey environment, as long as we are provided with the right details. So the company should be established, should be able to know what the activities of the company are going to be, and yeah, then it can be done within 1 week.
And to add to your both, I think for the incubator, we really have the idea, like, if the administrative part is done, what Donna referred to, which takes like 1 week, you are really ready to go. So the pipettes are calibrated, the consumables are in, there are chemicals, so you're really ready to go to start your experiment. And then from the SciNote perspective, we already have some users that are like currently running. So it are like we can assign you, and then we always make sure that we have some like empty user profiles ready. So that's something that we already arrange with SciNote beforehand. But I also have to say, also based on my own experience with QTM, adding users is always very fast, I would say. So it's also adding to the flexibility and the speed that we want to offer. It's mostly like a day or so, in my experience.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to add users, implement any add-ons. So from SciNote's perspective, we're trying to move as fast as possible. All right, next question we have.
Really appreciate it.
I think
so the next question. Sorry, go ahead, Donna.
Oh yeah, I think that one is for me. What happens if the startup advances to the next stage? Can it stay on Pivot Park? Yes. Pivot Park actually owns all the buildings on the campus. So that means that when the company is ready to move into their own laboratories instead of the shared lab space, we can arrange that somewhere on the park because we have enough space. And if the company is even going to grow further, it's going to become a big established company. If needed, we can even build buildings with them. So during the whole life cycle of a company, it can stay on Pivot Park.
Wonderful. All right, next question. So the next question actually has a few questions within it. So I'll answer these one by one. The first part is, does SciNote have free features? So SciNote does have a free version, which would have features you can use for free. So if you do want to check out the free version, please feel free to do so. You can access it directly from our website. And if you're interested in learning more about what the difference is between the free version of SciNote and the paid version of SciNote, you can reach out to me directly at the email address in the slide that's being shared. And so the next part of this question, does it generate a DOI for methods? So I'm going to assume in this case, DOI is referencing data object identifiers, in which case SciNote does. All of our data objects in SciNote have unique identifiers, which are never repeated in SciNote. So you can very easily tie a specific protocol, a specific result, an inventory, really any data object in SciNote exactly back to its unique identifier, which is then also tied to all of the traceability information around that specific identifier. And the last part of this question, how does it compare to something like protocols.io? So to keep it brief, from my experience using protocols.io in grad school, it's more of a collaborative platform to work together on a protocol, to share protocols publicly, and get feedback from other users on your protocol. So the collaborative aspect is available in SciNote. So you definitely have the ability to work on a specific method, protocol, experiment with multiple users. However, the key difference is that the data in SciNote is secured to your specific environment. So you won't be able to share any of this publicly, although you can share it with your teammates that are on the same SciNote environment as you. Before we go to the next question, Tom, Donna, anything to add surrounding that question there?
No.
Yeah, I was maybe just thinking about like, I agree with you, Arun, that it's your data is safe and secure into your own space. But I also had sometimes with collaborators who wanted to know a bit more about like some of the methods, and then we can also share them with the report function in SciNote. So that is really convenient to say like, this is what I want to show, and then it just generates this report, and that's a really helpful tool as well if you want to like share or collaborate on the protocols that are in SciNote.
Okay, next question. So I think this one might be aimed more towards you, Tom, and Donna. So the question is, how do you manage space and equipment between labs that work with infectious agents versus labs that require a strict microbe-free environment?
So I think, Tom, as our lab manager, this question is best suited for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. So for this we have physically separated rooms to actually keep microbes from like primary cell culture, and even if like the labs that we have that are shared, we have multiple of them. So even there we can physically separate processes that are not compatible with each other. And one of them is, for example, infectious agents versus microbe-free environments. So yes, that's something that we can just do by how the different labs are built.
Awesome. All right. And the next question we have is, does SciNote use AI or machine learning to help organizing? So SciNote has just forayed into the AI space with the introduction of our first AI-oriented feature, which is a protocol parsing tool. So this allows you to import a protocol as a PDF file, and our parsing tool will automatically read your PDF file and convert it into the SciNote format of your protocol. So this can help reduce a lot of burden on your end, having to manually create your protocols in SciNote. So as I mentioned, this is just our initial foray into the AI space. So we will be building on this to introduce more AI-oriented features next year and the year after. A big reason why we move at a very careful pace is because data security and data privacy is the most important consideration for us. We want to ensure that your data isn't being used to train AI models or isn't being accessed anywhere outside of your SciNote environment. And I think that wraps up all the questions. If there's any other last questions, please feel free to drop them in. Otherwise, we will be wrapping up here shortly. All right, I don't see any additional questions. So on that note, thank you everyone for taking the time to attend today. We really appreciate it. And Donna, Tom, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with SciNote, how things are set up at Pivot Park, and more importantly, giving us some very detailed insights on the challenges and also solutions on how you overcame these specific challenges. Thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for the opportunity to share.